So yoga tool number 6 for us is about a psoas release. And when we talk about psoas release, we're talking about both physical and psychological kinds of release that can come with this particular yoga exercise. A lot of times people refer to the psoas as like the most important muscle in the human body or the muscle of the soul. And again, that's in part that connection between the physical and psychological aspects of the psoas as it functions in our bodies. So I'm not going to read this whole quote here, but this is a really nice resource that you can look a little bit more closely at if you would like to. But in short, psoas dysfunction can contribute to a lot of different physical conditions. Again, a long line there for us to look at. Some of them I can pronounce, some of them I cannot. And then also just like decreased energy, feelings of well-being can also be attributed to psoas dysfunction. And we also have that relationship between the psoas and the diaphragm and the psoas and the lower spine. So a lot of things can be impacted by psoas dysfunction, by a tight psoas or an overstretched psoas, for instance. But again, that kind of mind-body-spirit aspect of yoga, again, part of the reason why people reference the muscle of the soul. Really great link here to a brief article that talks about all of these different dimensions of the psoas, so you can check that out as well. Here are just a couple different illustrations in terms of looking at the psoas and how, again, it connects here along the vertebrae and then down through the hips and then down to the upper femur here. The psoas is the only muscle in the body that connects the upper and the lower body. It helps us to walk around, it helps us to sit for a long time, and that can also impact the psoas, all of that sitting that we all do so much, for instance. Just a little bit more of a scientific diagram here where you can see, again, those connections with the T12, the L1 down to L4, and then again all the way down through here. And again, we can see all of those connections and again the range here that the psoas covers. So when we talk about psoas release, we might also talk about stretches for the psoas, but this particular tool is going to focus on releasing the psoas rather than stretching the psoas. So a lot of different kinds of stretches. Again, you can find a lot of those online. General kind of hip flexor stretches often also get the psoas. So the psoas is this much deeper muscle, right? A lot of our other hip flexor muscles are much more superficial. This is a very deep muscle. It's a muscle that we can't necessarily get to through touch. So again, physical benefits for releasing the psoas might be a release of low back pain and tightness or hip flexor tightness that can be relieved. Again, that long line of different physical ailments are related to the psoas. And so we want the psoas to be supple, to be juicy, so to speak, not tight or rigid. Juicy is a word that's used a lot to describe a well-functioning psoas. And like I've mentioned, also psychological benefits to psoas release. So trauma might be stored in the pelvis and in the psoas muscles, and they might be tight as a result of that fight or flight response of our nervous system. So if you think about that kind of pulling into ourselves in fight or flight, curling around our vital organs, that's curling around and activating the psoas muscles. So again, that can be something that can hold a lot of tension and more. And again, a long kind of quote here, I've got the resource down here for you. I want to make a short note that this resource here includes like a 30-minute practice, and I just want to caution you to take a look at it if you're interested, but I want to caution you that a lot of what she does, not a lot, some of what she does in the video would be considered to be contraindicated positioning of the body in more of the kind of fitness approach to yoga. So a lot of positions that I will never put you in the practice that we do in this class. So just something to be aware of and mindful of. But looking at, again, the tightness of the psoas affecting our ability to breathe deeply. The psoas is attached to our diaphragm, that breathing muscle. And so if we can't breathe deeply, our nervous system is going to sense a threat or a danger, and that fight or flight response can be activated. So a tight psoas equals poor breathing and that stress response. So those connections between again, the physical body and the emotional body might be part of what we look at here. And again, we can look at a lot more details here in terms of that relationship and the function of the psoas. So for this practice, you're going to need a yoga block, and a blanket is optional. So when I teach this series, when people have access to yoga blocks, I only use yoga blocks, but I've been doing different aspects of this series while teaching yoga on Zoom where people have blankets more available. And so the blanket might just be a softer, more adaptable, more pliable prop to use in some of the positions that we'll be in. The block, being much more rigid, provides a different kind of support, and it might be uncomfortable. So as you do this practice, you might just play with which prop works best for you in different aspects.